Chapter 142. 85,000. 88,000. 90,000. 110,000. 110,000. In just a short period of time, the price of the saber had exceeded 100,000. Even Li Lin was secretly shocked. 80,000 gold taels was twice as expensive as before. Li Lin thought that such a high price would make many people hesitate. But from the looks of it, the past month had fully aroused the hunger in everyone's hearts. Adding the words "one of a kind" to the price, it further ignited everyone's enthusiasm for the auction. 115,000. 118,000. 120,000. The bidding price was still increasing, and the Imperial Army members watching from the outside felt their blood boiling. This was a true treasured saber, one that was truly priceless. When treasured sabers in the outside world were worth less than 600 gold taels, only the Imperial Army members would be able to see treasured weapons worth 10,000 gold taels. Even though the price of the saber was expensive, many people had been preparing for this auction since a month and a half ago, even after the battle between Commander Zhao and Commander Huang. This is too exciting. That's 120,000 gold taels. It's several times more expensive than before. Why don't you take a look at how heavy this saber is? I've never heard of it before, and the materials used are 2 times more than before. Furthermore, this is the first saber of a master. Even if we don't use it, we can still sell it in the future. Did you see that? That's Commander Jing. Even Commander Jing is here. This was a true aristocratic family with deep foundations and inheritances. The Jing clan was one of the top prestigious clans in the Sui dynasty. Those prestigious clans outside can't compare to it. That's right. Even though the Jing clan doesn't stand out in the outside world, their reputation is far from that of those prestigious clans outside. But in reality, this was a true aristocratic family, a true colossus. Normally, they wouldn't even let you know. 120,000 gold taels isn't much to such a secretive clan. That's right. Also, the Bai clan is a 6th-generation Imperial Army general. It would be a wonder if they would let such an opportunity slip by. There are too many monks and not enough gruel. At the back of the hall, the faces of the crowd were flushed red, as though they were on steroids. They were even more excited than those who were participating in the auction. It was truly worth it to be able to spectate here for 10 gold taels. In the Imperial Army, who would care about 10 gold taels? 139,000. 140,000. 141,000. 142,000. 142,500. There was a limit to the value of any weapon, but it was not infinite. When the price reached 140,000, the increment gradually slowed down. Obviously, in everyone's hearts, the true price of this weapon should be around 150,000, not more than that. Not bad. Behind Li Lin, Zhao Fengchen nodded slightly. This price had already exceeded his expectations. It was quite good. It was apparent that this weapon was very popular among the Imperial Army. Hee. Logically speaking, this price was not bad. However, Li Lin couldn't help but laugh when he saw this scene. He had heard from Wang Chong before. This time, the sword was very similar. It used a new technology, and compared to the previous Wuxia steel weapons, there was an additional process. Almost immediately, Li Lin keenly realized that there was a huge business opportunity in this. Everyone, speaking of which, none of you have seen a real saber. Now, I'll let everyone take a look. Li Lin suddenly grabbed the hilt of the saber and pulled it lightly. Clang. A clear and melodious dragon's roar resounded in the ears of everyone in the hall. Following that, a cold light leaped up like a flood dragon and streaked across the ceiling above the hall. All the lights in the room suddenly dimmed at this moment and were robbed of their light. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. When they took a closer look, they realized that Li Lin was holding a uniquely shaped saber. This was a 7-chi-long saber. From the tip of the saber to the hilt, it was an extremely uniform length of 2 fingers. On top of that, the massive arc of the saber seemed to exude a soul-stirring sense of beauty. What was even more stifling was the magical inscriptions on the saber. It exuded an extreme sense of beauty, and at the same time, it exuded an intimidating sense of aggression. It was as though the saber had left one's grasp and was preparing to launch an attack, exerting an immense pressure on one's heart. In an instant, the originally noisy hall suddenly became extremely quiet. Zhao Fengchen was just about to pick up the tigu on the table, but upon seeing this sight, he was stunned for a moment, and his hand was just about to press down on it. As he was in a rush, he didn't have the time to take a good look at the saber that Li Lin had brought over. He thought that since they were both made of Wuxia steel, there shouldn't be much of a difference between them. However, Zhao Fengchen suddenly realized that the saber in Li Lin's hand was slightly different from his. It wasn't just in terms of appearance. Sush. Seeing that he had attracted the attention of the entire hall, Li Lin nodded in satisfaction. Shua. With a flick of his wrist, Li Lin brandished his saber in the air. Li Lin's movement wasn't huge, but the effect of his saber was astonishing. Hoo! The temperature in the massive hall suddenly plummeted, and from where Li Lin was standing, a huge gale suddenly blew. Due to Li Lin's slight movement, the calm air flow suddenly fell into disorder. The air seemed to have been sliced into millions of pieces, and even the area in front of the empty metal table was torn apart, forming numerous vortexes. On Zhao Fengchen's left and right, upon seeing this sight, the eyes of the two commanders who weren't too concerned abruptly narrowed and their faces warped. How sharp! Li Lin's strength was on a completely different level from that of Wang Chang's. The commotion caused by his saber was far greater than that of Wang Chang's. Everyone present was an expert, and with a single glance, they could tell that Li Lin's saber was sharp to the extreme. It was on a completely different level from Zhao Fengchen's saber. My clothes. The Imperial Army members participating in the auction suddenly exclaimed in shock. An Imperial Army member lowered his head to look at the undergarments that were exposed from his collar in shock. Unknowingly, the undergarments that were exposed had been torn apart by Li Lin's saber. At this moment, everyone looked at the 7-chi-long saber in Li Lin's hand once more, and their gazes immediately changed. This saber was simply too sharp. Wielding such a saber, it wouldn't be a problem for him to challenge an even stronger opponent than him. Not only would he not be at a disadvantage, his opponent might even be intimidated by him. 150,000 taels. Lord Li, I want this saber. Suddenly, someone raised his hand and shouted loudly. 160,000 taels. I want it. 180,000 taels. 190,000 taels. The others also came to a realization, and the crowd went into a frenzy. This saber had already reached an inconceivable level, and it was practically a killing machine. More importantly, there was no market for it. 200,000 taels. A voice shouted. Great. Li Lin's face flushed in agitation, and he clenched his fists tightly. The reason why he intentionally didn't draw his saber previously was for this moment. And now he had achieved his goal. Wait a moment. All of a sudden, a cold bellow sounded. This voice was incredibly loud, and it harnessed immense might, causing the ceiling of the hall to tremble. This abrupt change caused the entire hall to fall silent. Countless gazes turned toward the direction where the voice came from. With this glance, many people revealed astonished expressions. Lord Huang. Lord Huang. General Huang. Some of the Imperial Army members seated at the front row stood up and bowed slightly to show their respect. Huangshan, what are you doing here? At the top of the hall, Zhao Fengchen was seated upright, but upon seeing that person, his expression turned cold and he abruptly stood up. A majestic aura gushed forth like a tidal wave. The temperature in the hall plummeted, and the atmosphere abruptly turned tense. Amidst the crowd, there was a black-skinned man with a muscular body reminiscent of a bear. He was no other than Zhao Fengchen's nemesis in the royal palace, Huang Xiaotian. Due to the selection battle, Zhao Fengchen and Huang Xiaotian had fallen out. And after the selection battle, their relationship became even more tense. No one could have expected Huang Xiaotian to appear at this moment. In an instant, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone held their breath, and no one dared to speak. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. Since you can come, why can't I? Does the cold palace have your surname? Besides, weren't you the ones who invited me here? Huang Xiaoyan's eyes were as sharp as copper bells, and his black beard gave him a boorish appearance. His voice was extremely loud, and it felt as though he was being unreasonable. Before Huang Xiaotian could finish his words, he flicked his wrist, and a metal slip appeared on his fingertips. Upon seeing this metal slip, Zhao Fengchen's complexion immediately turned awful. He abruptly turned his head to look at Li Lin. It wasn't me, I don't know either. This sight was too abrupt, and Li Lin's complexion wasn't much better than Zhao Fengchen's. Zhao Fengchen and Huang Xiaotian were like fire and water, and in Zhao Fengchen's heart, Huang Xiaotian was a taboo. Wasn't this fellow trying to ruin Zhao Fengchen's reputation by appearing here? However, Li Lin knew that the metal slip in Huang Xiaoyan's hand wasn't from him. He was on the same boat as Zhao Fengchen, and ruining Zhao Fengchen's reputation was equivalent to ruining his own. How could he possibly do that? Seeing Li Lin shake his head, Zhao Fengchen took in a deep breath, and his complexion improved. Without a doubt, Huang Xiaotian's supporters in the Imperial Army weren't any lesser than his. There was a high chance that Huang Xiaotian's Imperial Army subordinates bought Li Lin's metal slip and gave it to Huang Xiaotian. Huang Xiaotian, what are you trying to do? This isn't your encampment. General Huang, don't mess around. Look at this place. Even though the auction is organized by Lord Zhao and Li Lin, the ones who are buying the sword are our brothers. But the ones who want to buy the sword are our brothers. If you dare to cause trouble, then it's the same as going against all our brothers. The two right Imperial Army commanders by Zhao Fengchen's side stood up. Even though Zhao Fengchen had won the martial selection, the faction behind Huang Xiaotian wasn't weak either. After his defeat, he actually managed to get him the position of vice-marshal. Thus, no one dared to go overboard. It's for the good of our brothers that I came here because I can't stand you fellows swindling our brothers' money. Huang Xiaoyan's face was cold, and as he spoke, he strode in from the periphery. You're Li Lin, right? Walking up to Li Lin, Huang Xiaoyan narrowed his eyes and narrowed his eyes. His teeth were cold, and he didn't hide his threat at all. Following Zhao Fengchen sure is insightful. I hope that you'll have a bright future in the Imperial Army. Huang Xiaoyan, how dare you? Zhao Fengchen slammed the table furiously. On the other side, Li Lin's complexion turned awful under Huang Xiaoyan's threat. His standing in the Imperial Army was no longer the same as before, and due to Wang Chang's Wuxia steel sword, he had managed to gain the limelight in the Imperial Army. However, compared to figures of Huang Xiaotian and Zhao Fengchen's level, he was clearly lacking. Regardless of whether it was Huang Xiaotian or Zhao Fengchen, both of them had a huge backing behind them. Li Lin had tried to look into the matter, but in the end he accidentally reached the depths of the royal palace. A chill ran down his spine, and he didn't dare to investigate any further. This kind of factional struggle was no small matter. Chapter 143. Lord Huang, this isn't the Mirage Dragon. There are so many brothers here. Lord Huang, please conduct yourself with dignity. At this moment, Li Lin suddenly spoke up. The moment he opened his mouth, everyone was shocked. Even Zhao Fengchen was taken aback. Li Lin, how dare you speak to me in such a manner? Huang Xiaoyan's face was cold as he glared at Li Lin. He didn't expect a lowly guard like Li Lin to talk back to him before so many people. Lord Huang, I'll say it once more. This isn't the Mirage Dragon. If Vice Commander Huang wishes to cause trouble, please leave this place. Li Lin spoke once more. This time, his gaze met Huang Xiaoyan's fearless gaze. In the hall, two commanders who were on good terms with Zhao Fengchen stood up, wanting to dissuade Li Lin. It wasn't a good thing to make an enemy out of Huang Xiaotian. However, Zhao Fengchen quickly waved his hands to stop them. Looking at Li Lin, Zhao Fengchen was astonished, and many thoughts flashed through his mind. He had a deep understanding of Li Lin. There was a huge problem with Li Lin's personality. He was overly cowardly, and the fact that he had been a minor guard of the North Gate for more than a decade was more than enough to illustrate this problem. Thus, Zhao Fengchen didn't have much hope for Li Lin. All he wanted was for him to be promoted to a minor guard. Yet Li Lin actually dared to talk back to Huang Xiaotian before so many people. This left him astonished. In that instant, Zhao Fengchen could vaguely sense a change in Li Lin. It seems like he's really different. Zhao Fengchen's eyes flickered. He suddenly had a different opinion of Li Lin. How dare a minor guard like you speak to me in such a manner? Huang Xiaoyan's gaze was incredibly cold. If looks could kill, Li Lin would have died many times over. Huang Xiaoyan had never been polite to those who dared to offend him. But in the end, Huang Xiaotian didn't make a move. You're just a trash who relied on a woman to climb up. On Duke Jiu's account, I won't teach you a lesson this time. Huang Xiaoyan's palm shot forward, and with lightning speed, he grabbed the Death's Abyss in Li Lin's hand. Boom! Li Lin didn't even have time to react before he was sent flying by this huge force. He staggered and only managed to stabilize himself after taking a few steps back. His face was extremely red. Li Lin could be considered an expert in the Imperial Army. But compared to a future big shot like Huang Xiaotian, there was still a huge gap. Even though Huang Xiaotian had lost to Zhao Fengchen, he was still one of the top experts in the future Imperial Army beneath the three marshals. How could Li Lin be his match? Brothers, please take a look. I, Huang Xiaotian, am not here for a personal grudge. It's just that I can't bear to see these fellows swindle others of their wealth. Huang Xiaotian easily snatched Death's Abyss from Li Lin's hand. His right hand gripped the hilt of the saber and slowly turned it around in the hall. A series of cold gleams swept through the void, causing everyone's eyes to be dazzled. However, Huang Xiaoyan's face was filled with disdain. It was as though this wasn't some treasure saber, but a worthless piece of scrap metal. Huang Xiaoyan, what are you trying to do? Zhao Fengchen suddenly spoke with a cold expression. Didn't I tell you? I can't bear to see you swindlers, so I'm here to expose you. Huang Xiaoyan turned to look at Zhao Fengchen and sneered coldly. A powerful aura emanated from his body. What is hard is easy to break. Zhao Fengchen, Li Lin, don't tell me you don't understand this logic. Any weapon that exceeds 3 qi will break easily, and the longer it is, the more likely it will break. Thus, in the Central Plains, there are very few swordsmiths who can forge weapons beyond 3 qi. A weapon of 4 qi is already a rare sight, but to think that you would use a weapon of 7 qi to fool everyone. Do you really think that everyone here is a fool? Huang Xiaoyan's words immediately caused a huge commotion in the hall. Everyone was here for the reputation of the wood steel weapons, and with Zhao Fengchen's example as well as the lack of time, they didn't really consider this problem. However, with Huang Xiaoyan's words, many of them came to a realization. That's right, what is hard is easy to break. Even though they didn't know how to forge swords, they understood this logic. Thus, in the Central Plains, no one would forge a weapon that was longer than 4 qi, unless it was a spear or halberd. However, this type of weapon was meant to be hunted on the battlefield, so it wasn't rare at all. In the military warehouse of the Tang Dynasty, there were plenty of such weapons. Even if they were to break, they could just replace them with a new one. Furthermore, the cost was extremely low. However, a sword was different. No one would want to buy a sword that would break easily. Lord Huang's words aren't without reason. Indeed, this saber is a little too long. The Imperial Army commanders whispered to one another, and they nodded their heads. Initially, they were dissatisfied with Huang Xiaotian. They thought that he was here to wreak havoc and exact vengeance after losing to Zhao Fengchen. However, his words weren't completely unreasonable. Raising Death's Abyss high up, Huang Xiaoyan's beard trembled. Upon seeing this sight, he sneered coldly in his heart, as though he had already predicted everything. Behind him, Zhao Fengchen and Li Lin's expressions changed slightly. Zhao Fengchen had bought the Wuxia steel sword from Wang Chong, defeated Huang Xiaotian, and became the marshal. Thus, he subconsciously chose to trust Li Lin and Wang Chong. On the other hand, Li Lin was his nephew, so there was no need for him to doubt him. Thus, the two of them didn't consider whether it was reasonable for a 7 qi long saber to be so long. Now that Huang Xiaotian had brought it up, the two of them realized that something was amiss. The principle that something that was hard would break easily was the most basic of all. Huang Xiaotian wasn't trying to make things difficult for them for no reason. Li Lin, Zhao Fengchen wanted to ask Li Lin about it, but the moment he thought of it he stopped himself. It was already too late to ask anything before so many people. Furthermore, if there was really a problem, their reputation would be tarnished by Huang Xiaotian's actions before so many people. To dare to scam so many brothers, there would probably be no place for them in the imperial army in the future. It was precisely because of this that their faces turned incomparably grim. But at this moment, there was no turning back. Chong, you mustn't let anything happen to me. Li Lin thought anxiously. He didn't have the time to think about how Huang Xiaotian would snatch the death's abyss. Standing in the hall, he could sense that the gazes everyone was looking at him from all directions weren't right. But for his nephew, Li Lin couldn't say anything even if he was scammed. Brothers, the sharper the weapon isn't necessarily the better. This weapon might look grand, but it's actually nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. Today, I'll show you what this death's abyss is and see if it's worth your money. As Huang Xiaotian spoke, he raised the 7-chi death's abyss in one hand and stretched out the index finger of his other hand. With a slight bend, he flicked his finger toward the 70% of the death's abyss. Ong long long. The sound of wind and thunder exploded in the air. Huang Xiaotian's fingertip instantly exploded with a dazzling golden energy that was like a comet. Although the energy was formed from yuan qi, it was as hard as diamond and gave off a feeling that it was indestructible. Diamond Gale Lightning Finger. This was one of Huang Xiaotian's ultimate techniques. It allowed one to concentrate all of one's strength into a single finger, making it as tough as Vajra. In close-range combat, Huang Xiaotian could even fight barehanded against an opponent wielding a divine weapon with only one hand behind his back. In Huang Xiaotian's previous battles, he had broken the record of more than 100 treasured swords and sabers. The most famous instance of Huang Xiaotian's Diamond Gale Lightning Finger was when Huang Xiaotian was out on a mission. When he passed by a mountain, he saw a dozen zhang tall basalt cliff. The entire cliff was a single piece of basalt rock embedded into the mountain. Huang Xiaotian's companions joked with him, asking if his Diamond Gale Lightning Finger could leave a mark on the basalt rock. In the end, Huang Xiaotian only chuckled. He walked up to the cliff, and with a flick of his finger, he shattered the entire basalt rock. Eventually, like a spider web, it shattered into countless fragments and fell down. This incident was extremely famous in the imperial army. Even decades later, Huang Xiaotian's name would still be mentioned by others, and it became a beautiful story. If Huang Xiaotian were to use his Diamond Gale Lightning Finger, there probably wouldn't be many weapons that could withstand it. At the very least, a 7-chi long saber wouldn't be able to withstand it. Wait a moment. Zhao Fengchen shouted. He wanted to stop Huang Xiaotian, but it was already too late. Hong long long, the entire hall was filled with the sound of wind and thunder. It was as though countless lightning bolts were streaking across the hall. In that instant, before everyone's eyes, time seemed to have come to a halt. A raging wind blew in the hall, and endless air currents flowed in the direction of the death's abyss along with Huang Xiaotian's finger. As Huang Xiaotian's finger inched closer, everyone's hearts leaped into their throats. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone knew that Huang Xiaotian's finger could collapse a cliff with a single finger. It wasn't something that could be looked at normally. This finger wasn't just a single finger, it was his full strength. No one knew whether the 7-chi long death's abyss could withstand this attack or not. Long. Finally, Huang Xiaotian's finger struck 70% of the saber, and the entire hall trembled. It was as though an invisible meteor had struck it, and the trembling of the saber reverberated in the air. But in the next instant, everyone was dumbfounded. Even after withstanding the full strength of Huang Xiaotian's Diamond Gale Lightning Finger, the 7-chi long Wuxia steel was actually unscathed. How is this possible? In that instant, no one was more shocked than Huang Xiaotian. The strength of the Diamond Gale Lightning Finger was incomparably powerful, and he had broken countless weapons with it. There weren't many weapons that could withstand it. Not to mention, this weapon was 7-chi long, making it even easier for it to break. As long as he flicked his finger at 70% of the saber's hilt, the weapon would definitely shatter inch by inch. It was impossible for a weapon that was 7-chi long to withstand his attack. This is impossible. Huang Xiaotian flicked his finger at the saber once more. This time, it was fast, hurried, and heavy. Long. The ground trembled, but the 7 qi long death's abyss in Huang Xiaotian's hand remained unharmed. In that instant, Huang Xiaotian's face paled. Just as Huang Xiaotian was about to flick his finger for the 3rd time, Zhao Fengchen finally couldn't stand it anymore. Huang Xiaotian, stop it. Zhao Fengchen bellowed furiously, if you don't stop now, don't blame me for getting nasty. Zhao Fengchen placed his right hand on the Wuxia steel sword by his waist, and with a stern expression, he exuded the disposition of a commander. Just as Li Lin had said, this wasn't the territory of the Mirage Dragon or Huang Xiaotian. Since Huang Xiaotian dared to act so brazenly, he shouldn't blame him for getting nasty. Vice Commander Huang, I've already said it. You're here to cause trouble. What do you mean by you can't stand us? You're here to exact vengeance. At this moment, Li Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter and heave a sigh of relief. In that instant he nearly died from fright. If Huang Xiaotian were to break down, he would have no place in the imperial army at all. In fact, even Zhao Fengchen wouldn't be able to tolerate him. Chong, good job. Li Lin's eyes glowed, and he couldn't help but burst into laughter. This nephew of his had really given him face this time. Li Lin was certain that after Huang Xiaotian's ruckus, in the future, he would be like a fish in water in the imperial army. The Wuxia steel weapons would become even more famous than before. Furthermore, the number of commanders in the imperial army who would request for swords from the Wang clan would be as many as carps in the river. Chapter 144. Lord Huang, this place is prepared for those who are auctioning the saber. If you don't wish to auction this saber, please leave. Also, even if Lord Huang wishes to buy it, Li Lin glanced deeply at the metal lot in Huang Xiaotian's hand, and an indiscernible smile appeared in his eyes. Lord Huang, I'll have to ask you to change the metal lot next time. This metal lot that costs 10 gold taels each can only stand at the very back. As Li Lin spoke, he pointed to the back of the hall. Boom. Upon hearing those words, everyone burst into laughter. It would be great if Huang Xiaotian succeeded in such a matter, as everyone would be impressed by him. But he failed. Clearly, there was nothing wrong with the saber that Chong Gongzi forged. The nature of this matter changed completely. There were already people in the crowd who were dissatisfied with Huang Xiaotian. Seeing how he was causing a ruckus, how could they possibly let go of this opportunity to mock him? Huang Xiaotian glared at Li Lin, who was behind the metal table, and his face flushed. He had made a name for himself a long time ago, and he had always been proud of his seniority in the imperial army. There was no one who didn't respect him. Now that he was being mocked in front of so many people, how could he possibly tolerate such humiliation? Huang Xiaotian was about to fly into a rage, but Li Lin didn't give him the chance. Everyone, the quality of this death's abyss is clear for all to see. The longer a weapon is, the easier it is to break. However, the weapon forged by my nephew isn't one of those. Now, let's continue the auction. The highest bid is 200,000 gold taels. Who else wishes to bid? Li Lin's gaze swept past Huang Xiaotian and landed on the crowd beneath the stage. Me. I offer 200,000 gold taels. What is 210,000 gold taels? I offer 220,000. 230,000. Huang Xiaotian's 2 adamantine storm fingers stirred the hearts of the imperial army members. The quality of this saber weapon was simply too high. Not only was it able to slice through metal as though mud, it was also able to withstand 2 adamantine storm fingers from Huang Xiaotian without suffering any damage. Just based on this point, this saber could be said to be one of the best in the world. 240,000 gold taels. This time, the voice came from behind. Li Lin was taken aback. Only then did he realize that the other imperial army general beside Zhao Fengchen was staring intently at the death's abyss in his hand. What's wrong, Lord Li? Can't we sell this weapon? The imperial army commander, surnamed Zhou, joked. Of course I can. Li Lin was overjoyed and extremely excited. Why not? He couldn't ask for more. 240,000. Any higher bids? 250,000. This time, it was the commander seated on Zhao Fengchen's left, and he was just as enthusiastic as before. He had no intention of participating in this auction. However, Huang Xiaoyan's adamantine Stormfinger was a legend in the Imperial Army. Any weapon that could withstand 2 flicks of his finger would definitely be worth collecting. An incomparably sharp blade, a demonic flower demon, and a material that could match up to the Diamond Tempest finger. Such a weapon was definitely worth 200,000 taels of silver. 251,000 taels. 260,000. This time, Zhao Fengchen also participated in the auction with an interested expression on his face. From the looks of it, Wang Chang's saber was indeed extraordinary. It was completely different from the swords he had forged in the past. Zhao Fengchen was tempted to buy one as well. Even if he didn't use it himself, he could keep it as a collection. Even though Zhao Fengchen didn't know how to make a saber, he still had the eye to appraise a sword. The value of such a saber would only grow higher in the future. Due to its rarity, this kind of collectible saber was different from those mass-produced treasured swords in the market. Bastard! Huang Xiaotian stood there, not knowing whether to stand or stay. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. At this moment, no one was paying attention to him. Everyone's attention was focused on the auction. What left Huang Xiaotian even more embarrassed was that these people weren't intentionally ignoring him. Rather, they were truly uninterested in him. Everyone's attention was focused on the saber. 300,000. Boom! Just as everyone was fiercely fighting over the saber, a thunderous voice suddenly came from outside the door. That voice was filled with immense might, causing the tiles on the roof to tremble. When the crowd heard that voice, they instinctively felt a deep sense of respect. His cloak fluttered, and an authoritative figure suddenly appeared at the entrance. The aura he exuded seemed to be able to tear apart the world, and it felt as though one was looking up at the world. In front of this majestic and tyrannical aura, everyone felt as insignificant as an ant. Grand Marshal. An Imperial Army commander stuttered, and his eyeballs were on the verge of popping out. What? The entire hall fell into chaos. Everyone who had been vying with one another to bid for the weapons suddenly trembled in fear and kneeled down. Not just the crowd, even Zhao Fengchen was shocked. He hurriedly got up from his seat and kneeled on the floor. Li Lin and the other captains of the Imperial Army were also panicking. They knelt on the ground, not daring to move at all. In the vast cold palace, there was a sudden silence, and there was only silence. Grand Marshal. At this moment, the only one still standing was Huang Xiaotian. He stood there in a daze, and his mind was in a complete mess. Everyone knew that there were only 3 people in the Imperial Army, and they were the 3 Grand Marshals. And the person before him was one of them. Even though Huang Xiaotian acted fearlessly with his seniority, he didn't care about the feelings of others. He was the same toward Zhao Fengchen and Li Lin. But before the 3 true leaders of the Imperial Army, he was insignificant. Zhao Fengchen and the others had privately occupied the cold palace for the auction and were discovered by the Grand Marshal. Logically speaking, this was a heavy crime, and it was beneficial to him. But Huang Xiaoyan clearly remembered that the Grand Marshal was still. Huang Xiaoyan was unable to wrap his head around the situation. That towering and imposing figure strode over, getting closer and closer to Huang Xiaotian. Just as Huang Xiaotian was filled with anticipation, that figure brushed past Huang Xiaotian as if he didn't see him at all. In an instant, Huang Xiaotian's face turned ghastly pale. "You're Li Lin, right?" That towering figure stopped before Li Lin, lowered his head, and smiled. However, it was completely different from how he smiled at Huang Xiaotian. "Yes, that's me." Li Lin couldn't see the expression on the Grand Marshal's face, and his heart trembled in fear. "I've always been looking for a saber that suits me. But it's a pity that I haven't found one. I like this saber a lot." As the majestic, disdainful, and domineering voice spoke, he stretched out his hand and stroked the blade. Immediately, a clear and melodious buzzing sound rang out. It was very pleasant to listen to. It's a pity that the inscription on it is too weak. It's not worthy of a top-notch weapon of this quality. But it doesn't matter, I can get someone to inscribe it again. The Grand Marshal spoke as he twirled the saber in his hand, as though he couldn't bear to part with it. Li Lin's face fell to the ground, and he suddenly recalled something. That's right. Of the 3 Grand Marshals, one was indeed a saber expert. However, he had never heard of him using a saber. Li Lin didn't pay much attention to it in the past. But now that he heard it, could it be that he didn't have a saber in the past? Or perhaps, he hadn't found a suitable saber in the first place. If that was the case, Lord Li Lin, am willing to offer this saber to the Grand Marshal for free. Li Lin immediately declared. His voice was firm, and there was a hint of hesitation in it. 300,000 gold taels might be precious, but Li Lin knew what it meant to him and Lord Zhao if he could win the favor of the Grand Marshal. With the protection of this lord, his and Zhao Fengxian's future in the Imperial Army would be bright, and no one would dare to do anything to them. Huang Xiaotian's incident would never happen again. To be able to win the favor of an Imperial Army Grand Marshal with 300,000 gold taels, this was a rare opportunity. Even if Wang Chong were to learn of it, he would surely support Li Lin. The moment Li Lin said those words, Huang Xiaotian's face darkened. However, the Grand Marshal's reaction was out of Li Lin's expectations. There's no need for it. 300,000 gold taels, it's decided. There's no need to say anything more. The Grand Marshal's voice was firm, and there was no room for doubt. 300,000 gold taels, right? I'll get someone to pass it to you soon. Your name is Li Lin, right? I'll remember this name. Your saber, I like it a lot. As the Grand Marshal spoke, he picked up the saber on the table and left. His black cloak fluttered in the wind, and it didn't take long for him to disappear into the night. Even though he had taken away the Death's Abyss, no one thought that the Grand Marshal would go back on his words. In the Imperial Army, the Grand Marshal's words were the golden tongue. Li Lin and Zhao Fengxian stood up from the ground, and they glanced at one another. Slowly, smiles appeared in their eyes. Lifting their heads, they realized that Huang Xiaoyan had already disappeared. However, they knew that this fellow wouldn't dare to act arrogantly before them anymore. The Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army. Wang Chong had done them a huge favor. Putting aside the matter regarding the Imperial Army, after handing the Death's Abyss to his uncle, Wang Chong began searching for the evil emperor while heading to the Ghost Tree District to play chess. There was still no news of the evil emperor, and Wang Chong didn't know where to look for him. Thus, his progress was slow. On the other hand, in the Ghost Tree District, on the golden chessboard, Wang Chong was pushing his opponent closer and closer, and he was gaining the upper hand. He had almost cornered his opponent. On this day, Wang Chong arrived at the Ghost Tree District. Just as he was about to continue playing chess, he realized that a white-haired elder had suddenly appeared on the other side. This white-haired elder had a skinny figure, and he was dressed in a simple black robe. His right hand was holding onto a white stone, and his back was leaning against a Chinese scholar tree. He was kneeling on the ground, staring at the chessboard in a daze. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong took in a deep breath. He felt as though his blood had congealed, and a huge shock surged through his soul. So Young-sun. Wang Chong's mind buzzed, and he felt as though the entire world had dimmed. In an instant, the only thing left in the world was the white-haired elder leaning against the tree. After nearly 2 months, Wang Chong finally met the elder whom he had yearned to meet in his previous life, the elder whom he respected the most, the war god of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 145. Wang Chong had never seen So Young-sun before, but Wang Chong knew that this person had to be So Young-sun. There was no earth-shattering aura, no shuddering majesty. The old man before him looked just like any other ordinary old man. If he hadn't known beforehand, if he hadn't known the details of this chess game, Wang Chong would never have guessed that this old man in black with a white chess piece in his hand was the famous war god of the Tang dynasty, So Young-sun. An undefeatable legend that many knew had passed away long ago. Under an old locust tree in the western district of the capital, there was an ordinary golden chess game. This war god had chosen a successor for his legacy in his twilight years. Wang Chong felt his eyes burn. Thinking of the living war god of the Tang dynasty standing in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. A man who stood alone against 10,000, a man who used his life to save the people in the last moments of his life, a man who lived up to his beliefs was worthy of everyone's respect. It was the same for Wang Chong. But very quickly, Wang Chong calmed himself down. So Yongsun's sudden appearance here was beyond his expectations. But this didn't mean that he would be able to smoothly inherit his legacy. The difficulty of inheriting the art of god and demon obliteration was absolutely maxed out. In his previous life, he wasn't the only one who had sat in front of this golden chess game. There were also many who could solve the game. But in the end, not a single one was chosen. So Yongsun dared to ignore the emperor's edict. So Yongsun even dared to reject the noble prince without hesitation. One could imagine the difficulty of inheriting the art of god and demon obliteration. It wasn't a coincidence that the art of god and demon obliteration was so famous. There was a big reason behind it. So Yongsun's personality played a big part. No one knew what his exact criteria for choosing a disciple was. Moreover, even if he was accepted into the sect, he would soon be kicked out of the sect. This kind of thing had happened before in his previous life. Wang Chong did not dare to be careless. So Yongsun's appearance was only the beginning. The next test was the most important. At this thought, he strode towards the locust tree. Old man. In front of So Yongsun, Wang Chong bowed respectfully, then sat down across from him, separated by the golden chessboard, as if he had come to play an ordinary game of chess and to meet an ordinary old man. So Yongsun quietly came out of the Su mansion. He wore a simple robe and restrained his overwhelming aura. He was traveling in a low-key manner. Obviously, he did not want anyone to discover his identity. At a time like this, Wang Chong naturally wouldn't say something like, "Senior," or something along the lines of being well-behaved and trembling with fear. At a time like this, it would be better to be more casual and at the same time show appropriate respect. So Yongsun did not speak. His thick eyebrows were tightly knitted as he stared at the black and white chess pieces on the golden chessboard, as if he didn't notice Wang Chong. "Brother, you are so awesome. Grandpa has been sitting here for half a day. He still doesn't know where to place his next move." At this moment, a childish voice came from the side. The chubby kid, Dai Jianjian, was standing behind So Yongsun's right shoulder. He was licking a red and sweet candied haw while looking at Wang Chong with admiration. Although he was young, he had been watching the chess game every day. He could tell a thing or two. The big brother he met this time seemed to be very powerful. The old grandpa actually didn't know where to place his next move. "Jianer." Suddenly, a majestic voice was heard. So Yongsun frowned slightly, but his body and movements didn't change at all. He was still holding the white chess piece and staring at the chessboard. The little boy stuck out his tongue, quickly shut his mouth and walked away alone. Wang Chong smiled and shifted his gaze back to the golden chessboard. With just a glance, the chess pieces on the chessboard were exactly the same as when he left yesterday. In other words, from yesterday until now, So Yongsun still hadn't figured out where to place his white chess piece. So Yongsun hadn't placed his chess piece yet, and naturally, it wasn't Wang Chong's turn yet. Everything was still the same as it was yesterday. Zhi. The sound of cicadas chirping came from the locust tree, but no one spoke. So Yongsun didn't speak, and Wang Chong didn't find it appropriate to speak either. Under the locust tree, all was silent. "Young man, your way of playing is a little strange." After some time, So Yongsun finally raised his head. His expression was solemn as he looked at Wang Chong. This was the first time Wang Chong had a chance to look at him face to face. So Yongsun was very skinny, but he was very dignified and gave off a sense of righteousness. However, his face was expressionless and unsmiling, giving off a very old-fashioned feeling. In addition, his eyebrows were very thick and snow-white. Even though So Yongsun had closed his door and refused to meet any guests for many years, and hadn't interacted with the court or the military for decades, his entire temperament had changed a lot. But in that relaxed and ordinary face, Wang Chong could still find the strength of the famous war god of the past. One was the war god of the past, The other was the future Grand Marshal of the world. This game of chess was a way for the war god to choose his disciples, and it was also a contest between the old and new marshals. Although in terms of martial arts, he wasn't a match for old Marshal Su, in terms of strategy, Wang Chong was more than confident. Even if his opponent was a war god like So Yong-sun, Wang Chong was still confident that he could beat him. Old Senior, war is the land of life and death. There is only victory and defeat. What is good and evil? Hearing So Yong-sun mention the word evil, Wang Chong didn't hold back. Although his martial arts were far inferior to So Yong-sun's, in terms of strategy, Wang Chong had experienced the chaotic end of the world. He had experienced thousands of battles, large and small, and was extremely experienced. Even if his opponent was So Yong-sun, even if he was facing a person like the war god, Wang Chong wasn't inferior. So Yong-sun slightly frowned. He clearly didn't expect Wang Chong to say this. He said that Wang Chong's chess style was evil, but Wang Chong had directly brought the game of chess to the path of war. Chess and war were interlinked, and Go was born from war. Wang Chong's words weren't wrong. Holding the heavy chess piece in his hand, So Yong-sun once again stared at the game in silence. Clack. After some time, he seemed to have finally thought it through. So Yong-sun's white chess piece finally landed on the board with a clack. After such a long time, So Yong-sun finally thought of a countermeasure. This sudden action immediately attracted Wang Chong's attention. But with just a glance, Wang Chong inwardly laughed. So Yong-sun's move truly seemed like a clever move. This white chess piece seemed to have the power to overturn the heavens and overturn the earth, to reverse the game of chess and create a path of survival. But in Wang Chong's eyes, he could only shake his head. Just as I expected. Wang Chong chuckled. He picked up a black chess piece from the box next to him and swiftly placed it on the center of the board. The moment this black chess piece landed, the situation on the board suddenly changed. Just a moment ago, Su Zhengchen looked as if he had just narrowly escaped death, and he had a brilliant move that could turn the tables around. But in an instant, his miraculous move turned into something rotten. With the death of a massive dragon, Su Zhengchen's army was completely routed. Under the locust tree, in front of the chessboard, So Yong-sun's brows immediately furrowed deeply, his expression extremely solemn. He had set up a tie chess game in the Ghost Tree district. Originally, it was to lower the difficulty and not stick to a single pattern, to select people with some talent in the art of war. But he had not expected this game to turn into an all-out war in the end, and he had actually lost. So Yong-sun had not expected this at all. Staring at this chess game of utter defeat, So Yong-sun did not move. His expression was extremely solemn, and no one knew what he was thinking. Whose child are you? After some time, So Yong-sun finally raised his head. To have such a game of chess in a chess game, this was definitely not something that could be taught by an ordinary family. Elder, I do not dare to refuse. I am Wang Chong, the son of General Wang Yan of the Tang Dynasty, and the grandson of the former Prime Minister Wang Jiuling. Wang Chong sat up on his knees, speaking confidently and respectfully. So, you're a descendant of Wang Bo. So Yong-sun's eyebrows twitched, but there wasn't much of an expression on his face. Duke Jiu, Wang Jiuling, the virtuous prime minister of the Tang Dynasty, there wasn't a single person in the Central Plains who didn't know of him. Speaking of which, there was no one who didn't raise their thumbs to show their respect. But So Yong-sun didn't address him directly by his name, but by his name. There wasn't the slightest hint of respect on his face either, as though he was speaking of a junior. If it was someone else, Wang Chong might have felt that the other party was insulting him, and he might have stood up and left. However, Wang Chong knew that there were only a few people in the entire Tang Dynasty who were qualified to address his grandfather as a senior. So Yong-sun was one of them. As the war god, So Yong-sun's era of fame far surpassed that of his grandfather. Back when he was at the peak of his power, his grandfather was still an unknown lad. Even though his grandfather had just celebrated his 70th birthday not too long ago, in terms of age, he still paled in comparison to the person before him. However, in terms of age, he was still a far cry from the person before him. He could be considered to be relatively young. Thinking about it, how old should he be now? 80? 90? How old should he be now? Over 80? Over 90? Wang Chang's heart was in turmoil. Wang Chang's mind was in turmoil. Grandfather only rose to fame when he was in his 20s. At that time, Su Zhengchen was at least in his 40s, perhaps even older. In fact, Wang Chong even suspected that his age might be close to 100 years old. In fact, Wang Chong even suspected that his age might be close to 100. After all, this person had lived through the era of Emperor Taizong. Chapter 146. However, unlike his grandfather, Wang Chong felt a deep, dark, and closed power from So Yong-sun. The person before him seemed to have completely sealed himself in his own world, isolated from the rest of the world. He was unwilling to talk to anyone, to interact with anyone, and to interact with anyone. Even the connection between him and himself was limited to the golden chessboard in front of him. There was no other interaction between them, and he was unwilling to have any interaction. Looking at the god of war of the Tang dynasty before him, Wang Chong felt a deep resonance and sympathy in his heart. Wang Chong was no stranger to such a situation. In his previous life, when he lost everything and had nothing, he was also in such a state. There was nothing left for him to yearn for in life. The only reason he lived was to complete a goal and mission given to him in life. So Yong-sun should be the same. Wang Chong thought to himself, thinking of the old man's experience. So Yong-sun lost his son when he was young, died in his old age, and all his relatives had passed away, leaving him all alone. Wasn't this the same situation as him back then? The only difference was that he had reincarnated and had a chance to change his fate and reunite with his family. So Yong-sun was different. Right now, he might just be choosing a suitable successor to pass on his art of god and demon obliteration. Or perhaps, as the god of war of the Tang dynasty, he would fulfill his mission and protect this country in silence and solitude until his death. Even though Emperor Taizong, whom he had once been loyal to, had left behind a golden edict that forbade the successors of the Tang dynasty from using this god of war, and also forbade him from leading an army again and having any contact with the army. Thinking of this, Wang Chong became even more determined. No matter what, he had to change this old man's fate. He had to let him walk out of his isolation and live out his life happily, instead of letting the tragedy of his previous life repeat itself and letting him die in loneliness and solitude. Old man, victory and defeat are common in war. Why don't we play another game? Wang Chong suddenly grinned. So Yong-sun raised his head, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. It seemed that Wang Chong's attitude was a little strange. However, he did not object and nodded. The chess pieces on the golden chessboard were quickly swept clean. The two of them sat opposite each other and started a new game. Unlike before, this time it was no longer a single stone a day. Instead, the two of them faced each other and played a complete game of chess. So Yong-sun originally wanted to choose his successor through a game of Tai chess, but Wang Chong's realm was obviously far beyond this level. Even so, Yong-sun couldn't beat him. Clack, clack, clack. It was quiet near the square. The wind blew past, and the huge crown of the locust tree shook. Leaves fell from the sky, landed on the chessboard, and floated past the two. So Yong-sun was a man of few words, and he didn't like to speak much. Ever since he agreed to Wang Chong's request, he had been sitting upright, as though a spear was stabbed into the ground. His posture was meticulous, reminiscent of the iron bones of a soldier. Wang Chong wasn't inferior to So Yong-sun either. In his previous life, he was also a grand marshal of the Central Plains who looked down on the world. It was just that Wang Chong would often restrain himself and not intentionally reveal his true nature. On top of that, his 15-year-old body and his low cultivation made it hard for Wang Chong to assume the disposition of a grand marshal of the Central Plains. In fact, Wang Chong even intentionally slowed down and relaxed his body so that the atmosphere wouldn't be as tense. Instead, he treated it as an ordinary game of chess. So Yong-sun's mastery of the art of war was undoubtedly high. However, it was a pity that his opponent was Wang Chong, the future greatest war saint in the history of the entire Central Plains. The two of them controlled their respective armies and fought against one another on the crisscrossing chessboard. So Yongsun's army was already formidable, but before Wang Chong's army, it was a pity that they were still met with defeat. So Yongsun's white stones gradually decreased while Wang Chong's black stones increased. Even though So Yongsun tried his best, Wang Chong would always have a new trap waiting for him. Unknowingly, So Yongsun was faced with the same predicament from before. There were only a few spots on the chessboard that he could place his stones on. So Yongsun was once again surrounded by enemies from all sides. The wind rustled as Su Zhengchen held the white stone tightly in his hand, and a deep frown appeared on his forehead. Staring at the chessboard, he fell into silence once more. The surroundings were silent. Wang Chong smiled. He didn't rush So Yongsun. Looking at the chessboard, he waited silently for So Yongsun to make his choice. Again! After a long period of time, So Yongsun finally placed down his stone and said 2 words. This was the first time he took the initiative to speak. After which, he closed his lips tightly, not saying a single word. All right. Wang Chong chuckled and didn't say anything. Putting away his stone, he started another round. The two of them fought on the chessboard, creating a bloody battlefield. Unknowingly, the sun was setting in the west, and the night had already fallen. Old master, it's getting late. Why don't we head back first? We'll play another day. Suddenly, behind the locust tree, an ordinary-looking black-haired old man walked out. He bowed and lifted his head, looking at So Yongsun with a worried expression. Looking at this skinny old man, Wang Chong felt like he was being pricked by a needle. His pupils shrank and his body trembled. He was so excited that he almost shouted. He had met an old friend. Wang Chong recognized this person. His name was Fang Hong. He was an old servant of the Su residence. He was the child of an old servant of the Su residence and grew up in the Su residence. So Yongsun lost his son and grandchild, and most of the maids and maids in the Su residence were dismissed. Only this loyal old servant stayed and served So Yongsun until his death. The main reason why Wang Chong knew him was because this old servant told him about So Yongsun in the future. But Wang Chong reacted quickly. Although he recognized Fang Hong, this old servant might not recognize him. Old man, Wang Chong called out. He quickly calmed down and pretended nothing had happened. The Fang Hong in front of him was much younger than when Wang Chong knew him. His hair was still black, unlike the white hairs of his future life. Moreover, he was different from the future life when he lost his master and was forever immersed in sorrow. The Fang Hong now was still loyal, had his own backbone, and had his own value in life. This made Wang Chong, who knew him, secretly happy for him. At least, that tragedy had not happened yet. Old man, it's getting late. I have to go back now. Why don't we fight again tomorrow? Wang Chong looked at So Yongsun and grinned. With Fang Hong's reminder, Wang Chong also remembered something. So Yongsun had a rule when he went out. Whether it was to play chess or to do something else, he had to return to the Su residence before the sky turned dark. Otherwise, if he was discovered by the patrolling imperial army and the news got back to the palace, it would cause a lot of trouble. So Yongsun did not want that person in the palace to notice him. As long as that person in the palace noticed him, it would mean that all the civil and military officials in the court, as well as the entire world, would notice him. For so many years, ever since Emperor Taizong, So Yongsun was used to keeping a low profile. He had always been like this. This had already become a habit of his subconscious. Although Wang Chong did not approve of this habit of his, today was the first time they met. Even if he wanted to change this habit, it would have to wait until later. So Yongsun looked at Wang Chong in silence. Finally, he looked at the chessboard. He saw that on the crisscross chessboard, the white pieces had already been destroyed. This game, he had lost again. A great war god who had dominated the battlefield had lost to a teenager in front of him. It was inconceivable. But this was indeed what had happened. Wang Chong's fight again tomorrow was just right, leaving him some face. Looking deeply at Wang Chong, So Yongsun finally stood up. Fang Hong, we're leaving. With these words, So Yongsun flicked his sleeves, turned around, and slowly left. Seeing So Young-sun's departing figure, Wang Chong smiled and also stood up to leave. Rome wasn't built in a day. It was not an easy task to have a sealed-off person slowly open his heart and face the world. If Wang Chong wanted to change So Young-sun, to have him walk out from that gloomy, sealed-off Su residence, it was not something that could be done in a day. But there was always a first step. Little by little, there would always be a time when a little bit becomes a lot. So the next day, Wang Chong still went to the meeting. Under the giant locust tree, a golden chessboard was placed. Behind the chessboard, a familiar figure was kneeling. Snow-white hair, black unlined clothes, motionless in the morning wind, as if he had been waiting for a long time. "Good morning, senior." Wang Chong grinned as he made his way over and sat opposite So Young-sun. "Hurry, come here." Wang Chong beckoned behind him. Very quickly, several guards responded, carrying a small table and placing it to the side. On the small table, there was a plate of peanuts and 2 pairs of exquisite chopsticks. "What's this?" So Young-sun frowned. He glanced at the table by the side and looked at Wang Chong. "Peanuts." Wang Chong chuckled as though saying, "You can't possibly not recognize peanuts." So Young-sun didn't say a word. Instead, his frown deepened. "Haha, senior, so this is what you're talking about. Isn't it too monotonous just to play chess? Eating peanuts while playing chess is much better. Here, these chopsticks are for you." Wang Chong chuckled as though he had only understood the other party's intentions now. Change came from little by little. Facing this old man, the only thought in Wang Chong's mind was to make the other party happy. He was the war god of the Tang dynasty. For this empire, for the Central Plains, and for the people of the world, he had dedicated his entire life. Such a person deserved swift retribution, and he deserved to be happy. The world owed him too much. And he didn't owe the world anything. Wang Chong wanted to obtain the art of god and demon obliteration, but Wang Chong wished for this old man to live out his remaining years happily. A plate of peanuts was just the beginning. Wang Chong believed that one day, this old man would walk out of his past, walk out of the shadows, and return to his original self. The surroundings were silent, and only the rustling of the locust tree leaves could be heard. Chapter 147. So Young-sun didn't eat the peanuts that Wang Chong brought over. However, it was already a great improvement for him to allow Wang Chong to bring the table to the side of the chessboard. Once something started, it was impossible to stop. So Young-sun didn't stop Wang Chong, and things went out of control. On the second day, Wang Chong brought a plate of braised beef. On the third day, Wang Chong brought a few side dishes. On the fourth day, Wang Chong finally brought a pot of wine. "What's this?" This time, So Young-sun finally couldn't hold back. He frowned and looked very displeased, as if he was very averse to wine. So Young-sun had seen all kinds of ambitious and powerful people in his life, from Emperor Taizong to the holy monk of the Great Snow Mountain Temple in the west of Uzan, to the Sun Holy Land in the north of Turkgrad, and then to the famous generals and ministers of Goguryeo, Uzan, Turks, Abbasid Caliphate, and Karax Spazu. There was not a single person who didn't behave themselves in front of him, and there were very few who didn't behave themselves like Wang Chong. Putting aside the peanuts on the first day and the braised beef on the second day, Wang Chong became more and more outrageous in front of him. Not only did he bring all kinds of side dishes, he even brought wine. A chess match that should have been very quiet, elegant, and charming was forcefully changed by Wang Chong. "Wine," Wang Chong said, as if he couldn't see the displeasure in So Young-sun's eyes. As he spoke, he placed a wine cup in front of So Young-sun and poured a cup full of wine. "I don't drink." So Young-sun frowned and didn't even look at Wang Chong's wine cup. "You're the descendant of a family of generals. Don't you know this?" So Young-sun's eyes were cold. Although it had been decades since he handed over the empire's military power, he had long been far away from the center of power. So Young-sun still maintained the habits of the army after spending half his life in the army. He didn't mind Wang Chong bringing peanuts or braised beef, but he absolutely couldn't touch alcohol. "Hee, old man, you're joking with me again. I'm just a child, and you're not a famous general on the battlefield. You don't need to lead an army to the battlefield, so what's there to delay? Wang Chong said casually. So Yongsun's eyes were very cold, and he gave off a feeling of authority without being angry. The pressure accumulated from years of military life was not something an ordinary person could withstand. If it was anyone else, they would have been filled with fear and trepidation. However, Wang Chong was not affected in the slightest. Not only that, but Wang Chong even drank his own cup as he spoke. The wine was very light, and the alcohol content was very low. After Wang Chong drank the wine, he picked up a tender piece of braised beef and slowly chewed it in his mouth. So Yongsun froze for a moment, then suddenly fell into a daze. Yes. It had been so long that he had forgotten. He had forgotten that he was no longer that So Yongsun, that he no longer had any dealings with the military. Right now, what else could he delay? For a moment, So Yongsun was a little dazed. Emperor Taizong's removal of his armor and return to power had always been the deepest concern in his heart. Senior, it's fine if you don't want to drink. At this moment, Wang Chong spoke. If you can lose 3 fewer points than yesterday, you don't need to drink. Otherwise, you'll be punished with a cup of wine. What do you think? Impudent. So Yongsun's expression shifted, and he inadvertently revealed the dignity of a great war god. Although times had changed, how could a habit he had cultivated for decades be so easily changed? Grandfather, you're being shameless. Grandfather, you're being shameless. If you're willing to bet, then you have to accept the bet. If you're willing to bet, then you have to accept the bet. At this moment, a tender voice came from the side. A chubby child suddenly hugged So Yongsun's arm and vigorously shook it, refusing to budge. The authority that Su Zhengchen had just revealed a moment ago immediately crumbled. For some reason, the first time he saw this child several months ago, he had felt that they were particularly congenial. This child had also brought him no small amount of joy. In front of this child, he could no longer put on any airs of dignity. Fine, I agree. Just agree. Su Zhengchen said helplessly as he was being shaken violently. He felt that Dai Jianjian was congenial, but Wang Chong, this child's talent in the art of war was simply breathtaking. In his decades of life, he had never seen anyone like Wang Chong, who exuded such formidable talent. Not even he could defeat this child. He had no way of hardening his heart against these 2 children. The chessboard was laid out, and the chess pieces were all over the place. A few hours later, the white pieces on the chessboard were scattered all over the place. This was the first time that Su Zhengchen had suffered a crushing defeat in the past few days. Looking at the chessboard in front of him, So Yongsun's face alternated between green and white. Finally, he let out a long sigh, grabbed the wine cup on the table, and drained it in one gulp. But perhaps because he had not drunk in decades, he choked on the wine, his face flushed red, and he coughed several times. Seeing this scene, Xiao Jianjian laughed heartily, thinking that this big brother Wang Chong was very interesting. Wang Chong also couldn't help but laugh. There were many things that, once started, could not be stopped. Although a few days ago, when Wang Chong brought over peanuts, stewed beef, and side dishes, this war god did not touch any of them. But Wang Chong knew that, after drinking this mouthful of wine, the next cut would be completely different. In the distance, under the eaves of an inconspicuous house, the old servant Fong Hong silently watched this scene, and he couldn't help but smile. It had been a long time since he had seen his old master like this. Although his face was flushed red, and he even choked on the wine. But finally he was not like before, immersed in pain. For some reason, Fong Hong was suddenly very fond of the youth named Wang Chong and the 4-year-old child. Wang Chong's judgment was correct. After drinking that cup of wine, he had indeed broken something. It was as if he had broken through some kind of taboo and barrier in his heart. In the following days, So Yongsun really didn't refuse, and would occasionally pick up a few peanuts, a few slices of beef, a few side dishes with his chopsticks, and drink a few mouthfuls of wine, although he didn't drink much, only a little occasionally. But compared to before, he was indeed much more easygoing. When Wang Chong played chess, he also felt that the atmosphere was no longer trembling, as if he was treading on thin ice. This was a change. Seeing that the old man whom he respected was able to let go of some of the knots in his heart, Wang Chong was secretly happy for him. Time passed day by day, so Yongsun still didn't reveal his identity. Wang Chong also didn't reveal it, and still went to the ghost tree district every day. Under the big tree, one old and one young, they looked no different from anyone else. During this time, Wang Chong handed over the goods to his uncle. The amount of 300,000 taels of gold really surprised Wang Chong. Wang Chong also didn't expect that the Death's Abyss could be sold at such a terrifying price. This also strengthened Wang Chong's decision to walk the quality route. With the 300,000 taels of gold, Wang Chong completely made up for his previous losses. However, at the same time, Wang Chong's search for the evil emperor was in a deadlock. No matter how many people Wang Chong sent out, there was still no trace of the evil emperor. Wang Chong, what are you doing? Standing like a pine tree, sitting like a bell, every action of yours has rules. How can you behave like this? So Yongsun looked at Wang Chong opposite him and twitched his eyebrows, looking a little displeased. Wang Chong was becoming more and more humble in front of him. In the past, he would only bring some wine over, but now, even his sitting posture changed, and he began to play chess while lying down. Life should be full of joy, don't let the golden goblet face the moon emptily. What's the point of having so many rules in life, as long as you're happy? Wang Chong, on the other hand, was all smiles and didn't seem to mind at all. So Yongsun didn't expose his identity, and Wang Chong was happy to play dumb. Otherwise, if So Yongsun really revealed his identity as the war god, he wouldn't be able to do so. If both sides were to play their part, they probably wouldn't be so relaxed anymore. So Yongsun frowned, but didn't say anything in the end, and continued to look at the chessboard. On the golden chessboard, the white pieces were scattered all over the place, and he was about to lose again. Cough, cough, cough. Just as the two of them were playing chess, a violent coughing sound suddenly came. While the two of them were playing chess, Xiao Jianjian somehow found his way to the cloud pattern table that Wang Chong brought. He secretly picked up a piece of braised beef and took a sip of wine. The braised beef was nothing, but when he drank the wine that Wang Chong brought, he couldn't help but choke and cough violently. Cough, 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 it's not good at all. It's not as good as the charcoal wine of the Zhou clan in the east of the city. Xiao Jianjian cried out bitterly as he patted his chest. Seeing this scene, both Wang Chong and So Yongsun couldn't help but laugh. Little guy, who told you to drink secretly? So Yongsun scolded jokingly, but his eyes were filled with love, as if he was looking at his own son. That's right, you're so young but you don't learn good things, and you even secretly imitate others to drink. Wang Chong also couldn't help but scold him jokingly. But the next moment, as if a bolt of lightning flashed across his brain, Wang Chong suddenly froze. Little guy, what did you just say? Wang Chong suddenly looked at Xiao Jianjian and asked. At this moment he felt as if something had stirred him. It was as if something that had been forgotten for a long time was about to rise to the surface. I said that your wine tastes terrible. Xiao Jianjian crossed his arms, a look of displeasure on his face. Not this, the other one. Wang Chong said anxiously. What? The charcoal wine of the Zhou clan in the east of the city? You think I haven't drunk it before? That's not it. Rumble. As if a bolt of lightning had flashed across his mind, Wang Chong's entire body trembled. Wang Chong suddenly remembered. The Zhou clan in the east of the city? The Zhou clan in the east of the city? That's right, how could I have forgotten? At this moment, Wang Chong's heart was incomparably agitated. He suddenly remembered. About the evil emperor, about that mediocre expert who used the great yin-yang heaven creation art. He remembered everything. That's right. About that expert, the wealthy family that he had worked for was the Zhou clan in the east of the city. He had only heard this name a few times, but there was no doubt about it. And Wang Chong had vaguely heard from those people that the Zhou clan in the east of the city seemed to know how to brew a type of wine. This wine was not famous among the aristocratic families, and almost no one knew about it. But among the commoners of the lower classes, it was a household name. That wine was the Zhou clan's charcoal wine. If he found the Zhou clan in the east of the city, He would find that expert. If he found that expert, he would find the evil emperor. At this moment, Wang Chong knew that he had really found him. Chapter 148. Wang Chong left under the astonished gazes of So Yongsun and Xiao Jianjian. By the time he left, Su Zhengchen had suffered a crushing defeat once more. The white stones on the chessboard were scattered all over the place, leaving this war god with a deep frown on his face. After leaving the Ghost Tree district, Wang Chong drove to the east of the city and asked a few people for directions. Even though few among the nobles of the Tang dynasty knew about the charcoal wine, it was still very famous among the common folk. In just a short while, Wang Chong found the Zhou clan. A huge courtyard was surrounded by a wall. On the wall, a long flagpole was erected. On top of the flagpole was a huge wine flag with a red background. Zhou Ji charcoal wine. The wine flag fluttered in the wind. From afar, the red flag was dotted with black spots. It was obvious that it had been around for a long time. Even after such a long time, the owner had never changed the wine flag. Clearly, they were very proud of their brand. I didn't think that this would be the place where that person worked. Half a street away, a carriage was parked. Lifting the curtains, Wang Chong gazed at the Zhou clan winery through the window, and he couldn't help but sigh. He had heard many stories about that person and knew that he used to work in a wealthy family. But this was the first time Wang Chong had seen the place where he worked. If not for Xiao Jianjian drinking secretly during a game of chess and inadvertently mentioning it, Wang Chong might not have known that this was where he used to work. Young master, I've investigated it. There's indeed someone called Zhou here. At this moment, the door of the carriage opened, and a guard of the Wang clan walked in with a respectful expression. I've asked the others as well. They all said that they know of this person. They said that he had worked for the Zhou clan for many years. He was born in poverty and had an old mother. However, he was a dutiful, honest man of few words. He kept a low profile, but he was very diligent. The people around him had a good impression of him. Wang Chong nodded. This was completely in line with what he knew. Before the age of 27, Zhou Wen was no different from an ordinary person. He lived his life diligently. He didn't have any talent, but he could still rely on his own hands to support himself. The one who truly changed his fate and made him become that person in the future was still that person, the mysterious, the evil emperor. He had relied on his own strength to turn an ordinary person with mediocre aptitude who was unwilling to fight into a powerhouse that many people would look up to in the future. Did you ask him when he'll be off work? Wang Chong sat in the carriage and nodded slightly. I've asked. Because he has to take care of old mother, he goes back on time to cook for her. Therefore, he got up to work much earlier than the others. Before 5 o'clock in the morning, he would get up to cook and then run to the Zhou family's workshop to start working. By the time others start working, he has already been working for more than 4 hours. So, even if he gets off work early, he still works much longer than others. Moreover, he is very diligent and can do the work of 2 or 3 people. Therefore, the Zhou clan is happy to take him in. The guard lowered his head and spoke word by word. Clearly, he was asking very carefully. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that the current young master was no longer the same as before. After the Four Quarters Embassy incident, there were even rumors that the one who was most likely to take over the old master's position in the Wang clan was the youngest young man before them. Thus, the guards treated this young master with extreme respect, and they didn't dare to be careless in carrying out the tasks entrusted to them. You've worked hard. Wang Chong nodded before closing his eyes and waiting silently. After an unknown period of time, the gates to the Zhou clan's residence suddenly opened, and a slender figure walked out. Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen is here. He's going back to cook for your mother again? Hurry up and go. We'll take care of the matters here. Outside the Zhou clan's residence, the voices of Zhou Wen echoed ceaselessly. Suddenly, Wang Chong opened his eyes and peered through the window. He saw a slender figure standing at the entrance of the Zhou clan's residence with a sincere smile on his face. It's him. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. That Zhou Wen, who had just finished his work, wasn't as rough, tanned, and dirty as Wang Chong had imagined him to be. On the contrary, he was dressed in a plain gray robe, and his entire body was neat and tidy. His face had been washed, and his skin was fair and clean. He didn't look like someone who worked in a winery. Instead, he carried the disposition of a scholar. On top of that, Zhou Wen was also very tall, standing at around 7 feet tall. This made him stand out among the Zhou family's employees like a crane among a flock of chickens. But even so, Zhou Wen's simple personality and honest smile allowed him to blend in with the workers and wine merchants. Wang Chong could tell that the people around him were very fond of this tall man. After greeting the people around him, Zhou Wen carried a bag on his back, and without much thought, he headed back home. "Follow him," Wang Chong said. The carriage moved slowly, following behind Zhou Wen at an unhurried pace, maintaining a distance that wouldn't raise any suspicions. The sky was getting dark. Perhaps he was worried that his mother would be hungry, but Zhou Wen walked very quickly. Although it was a normal pace, it was equivalent to a jog for many people. Wang Chong followed him through the streets, alleys, and alleys. Some places were too narrow for the carriage to pass, so Wang Chong abandoned the carriage. Although it was a little inconvenient, it made it harder for him to follow Zhou Wen. As he followed Zhou Wen, Wang Chong saw him purposely make a turn, and at the corner of the street, he took out a copper coin and placed it in the bowl of a blind beggar. At a spot where a banyan tree was planted, Zhou Wen took out the lunch that he couldn't bear to eat in the afternoon and fed it to a few pigeons with a smile. His smile was very happy. When Wang Chong saw this scene from afar, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He had once seen the Zhou Wen from afar. His face was stiff, and there was no smile on his face. It was like a person who had lost his soul, living only for a certain purpose. Anyone who saw him could tell that he wasn't happy. For those who had seen him before, it was hard to believe that this person could be like this, smiling so happily. It was so simple, yet so fulfilling. Strength wasn't always better. Some people were willing to exchange everything for strength, but others were willing to exchange everything for everything. Wang Chong believed that if that person saw this scene, he would definitely be willing to exchange everything for what he had now. What is that guy doing? He's getting faster and faster. He's running. Did he notice us? Suddenly, a sound reached their ears. The guards looked into the distance in shock. Zhou Wen had been walking at a constant speed. But after feeding the pigeons, he suddenly sped up. In the end, he even started running, as if he had discovered something and wanted to shake them off. He was delayed on the way. He's rushing back to cook for his mother, Wang Chong said faintly. The guards were astonished. Look at the sky. If he doesn't go back to cook at this time, his mother will starve. Wang Chong said lightly. The guards were stunned. They looked up and saw dark clouds hanging low in the sky. It was already dark. Unknowingly, it was almost time for dinner. But Wang Chong ignored him and followed after him. His cultivation was far higher than Zhou Wen's. When he took a step, he was faster than Zhou Wen. He followed Zhou Wen all the way through the streets. Finally, Wang Chong followed Zhou Wen and saw him rush into a low and shabby mud house covered with thick white thatch. The surroundings were dark. The house stood tall in the night. There was no one in the surrounding dozens of feet. It was lonely, giving off a feeling that it was isolated from the rest of the world. Mother. When cough. An old voice, accompanied by a cough of pain, came from the narrow room. A moment later, a dim oil lamp lit up. Then there was a series of clanking sounds. Wang Chong stood under a lush camphor tree. Soon he smelled the aroma of food. Mother, don't choke. Zhou Wen's respectful voice came from the room. A moment later, the window of the room opened, and a cloud of smoke drifted out. When the window was opened, Wang Chong saw Zhou Wen walking out with 2 plates of appetizers in his hands. 2 pairs of chopsticks, 2 small bowls, and a dim oil lamp. Wang Chong looked at Zhou Wen sitting on one side and a thin old lady with silver hair sitting on the other. As she coughed, she kept putting food into Zhou Wen's bowl. Child, eat more, eat more. Looking at this scene, for some reason, Wang Chong suddenly felt a lump in his throat. He was filled with emotions and an indescribable feeling. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly knew what that person had lost. This person was not scheming. Therefore, he could hear many things about this person. But among all the bits and pieces, he had never heard him mention his mother. This was a filial son. He could wake up early and work late before the sky even brightened. He could take care of 2 people. After a tiring day, he could sit at the dining table and smile, just because he had a mother with whom he could only depend on. But when he became a hero and became the him, in the future, everything was lost. He was already a lonely person. A person had lost the most important thing in his life. Wang Chong suddenly remembered a rumor that he had heard a long time ago. It was said that the reason why that person's temperament changed so much and he started a massacre was because his mother was killed by a group of thugs. This rumor had no origin and nowhere to go. It only spread among a few people and was quickly forgotten by those who said it. Wang Chong did not care about it. But at this moment, Wang Chong suddenly understood. If he was not mistaken, all of this was probably related to the evil emperor. Such a filial son would not attract any thugs. The only possibility was that the evil emperor who had been plotted against. Others' fortuitous encounters might be a disaster for others. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.